Hi, I'm Steve Rohde. I'm a professor of environmental studies and biology at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. We're at Spring Lake Park this morning on a beautiful fall day. Spring Lake Park is one of the largest combined sewer overflow projects in Omaha. CSO is the acronym. We have 5 people with a lot of different experiences that have made themselves available for interviews here to help us understand the park from the community perspective, the engineering design perspective, and the maintenance perspectives. Emily Holtzclaw, a PE, certified floodplain manager for Jacobs Engineering. She's also a compliance coordinator for several of the CSO projects. John Royster is a landscape architect, and his design firm Big Muddy Workshop had a significant role in the design of green infrastructure and best management practices here. Rocky Keene, he's a senior water resources engineer with his own firm called Common Sense Water Resource Engineering. And then Adam Wilmes is PE, and he's in the design division of the Omaha Public Works Group. Our first interviewee is Janet Bonay, a longtime resident of the neighborhood and a strong community advocate that's been very instrumental in really getting the community behind the design, the construction, and now the ongoing maintenance of the park. Can you tell us about the partners that were involved with this project and partners in the community in general? How were they involved?
Well, the project started long before CSO was a twinkle in anybody's eye. It started with the neighbors wanted to do something with the park before it was turned into either a dump site, a formal dump site, or it became the next 9 holes of the golf course. We wanted to keep the natural area, and so we started working on some ideas. And when CSO came along to do the sewer separation, there was funding for it. And so all the partners that we had beforehand were urban planners from Kansas State University. We had involved the Groundwater Guardians, we involved the Sierra Club, Audubon Society. They came down and did surveys of the wildlife, the plants, and from there it just kind of association, and we formed the Spring Lake Park team to actually be guardian.
So this project was essentially started by the neighborhood in the early 2000s. Janet Bonay is a resident of the neighborhood and has been an active leader for the neighborhood association and other organizations. And she wrote a grant application to the Nebraska Environmental Trust Fund to help fund a conceptual design basically for the park. And then at about the same period of time, the city of Omaha was planning and beginning the combined sewer overflow program. So in 2008 and 2009, the city developed their long-term control plan for the whole combined sewer system. And this is a natural valley, and so there was a historic brick sewer that went down the center of the valley. And one of the projects in the plan was to separate the sewers so that sanitary sewage just went straight to the plant and stormwater went to the park, overland, and to the river. During the early planning phases, the city had a public engagement process, getting input and concepts of what the community would like to get out of the project as well as what the engineering process needed. And then they went through a conceptual phase of looking at alternatives, preliminary cost estimates, and things like that. So there was public meetings as part of that process and kind of a standard engineering design process of starting with a conceptual idea and getting input and eliminating the things that might not be practical or working and refining to an option that'll work best.
Well, the one thing that you have to remember when we started this project, it was basically a detention pond project to reduce the peak flows downstream so we could reuse the existing combined sewer system. In the end, it ended up saving the city $5 to $6 million because we were able to incorporate the green infrastructure. But where it exploded from a detention pond project or pure engineering project is then we started adding the BMP aspects of it, the Spring Lake part of it, incorporating components into the golf course, the treatment train you talk about. So all those pieces then became part of that detention pond concept from an engineering standpoint.
We started design 10 years ago. There were 2 phases. The first phase took about 6 years. This phase has taken about 4 years. And the big thing too is it's covered an area of about 400 acres within South Omaha. So we really have had a large impact on water quality in this portion of Omaha.
So now what we have is the pure treatment train. We have pre-treatment upstream in the streets through saffle baffles and other methods. And then it goes through BMPs, your standard, like we have down here. We go through wetlands, we go through lakes, but we basically have this long treatment train that became part of the project. Yeah, and in hole 7 where we're standing is a really good example of that treatment train, where upstream we have 2 storm pipes coming into it, and we put a storm scepter on one pipe. We got a saffle baffle on another that keeps the trash from coming into the park. So we have the BMP down here, and it's kind of specially designed so that when the water comes into it, it first goes into the concrete block area with the idea if there's any sediment left over, we can then maintain it and clean it up. Then it goes through the river rocks, and the idea is that during low flows, it'll go into the channel and then it'll spread out into the BMP, so we don't get those high velocities that tend to blow it out. And then ultimately it all flows down the fairway to a detention pond in the middle of the fairway that's only wet during extreme events. But I like to say from an engineering standpoint, from this project, it originally was an engineered project as a detention pond, but 5-10 years from now, all that's going to be gone, and people will just see the park aspects, will be playing a golf course. I think from a key takeaway from an engineer, you can come down here and go, you know what, this is just a big detention pond, but then no one but I would know that, so that's the best part about this project.
So this is a question for both John and Rocky. What are some of the special features of the project to improve water qualities?
I think the special feature really is this, and that is we took a park landscape and actually restored a lot of the hydrology to it. And that instead of water going to the Missouri River in a gray pipe, it actually is infiltrating in the park. That was a big goal. The other thing we did is we made the golf course better, which is great. We added some nice features. There's some here on hole 7, also on hole 3, where we made it a more interesting golf course to play, so that was good. And I think the real neat thing is we restored the lake to Spring Lake Park. The lake had not existed since about the 1930s. We think it actually didn't exist about 1915 when they put the big sewer line through where the lake had been. So we improved the park for the people that use it as well as the golf course. And that's what I think is really important.
Well, I think then a side benefit of it was we are conscientious that communities like the city of Omaha have to improve the water quality before it discharges into the Missouri River. So when we separated the sanitary and the storm, we had to be aware that we were trying to improve the water quality of that before it discharged out of our system. In the future, this is basically meets those requirements for the water quality.
John, would you talk a little bit about the BMP below us relative to the plants, and also mention what the black pipe is down
Sure.
there?
So the one thing you've got to be really careful with is with new green infrastructure is really fragile. Your plants are not established for about the first year. So what we did here is we put in what's called a bypass pipe, and literally all the water that now comes out of the neighborhood is being piped through the BMP, which is a little ironic, but what we needed to do for the first year. If we go down there and look in the weedy mess we have down there, one thing we'll see plants that last year when we planted them in the fall were this high, that are now this high and about this big around. So it really has worked. And again, we cooperated with the golf course superintendent. He was kind enough to water our basins because they weren't getting watered. And so that's worked very well. This fall we'll pull that pipe out, and then as Rocky said, about 14 acres is first cleaned at the edge of the park when it enters the system. The water will come out into this pipe, go down the rock area, and spill into the 2 side basins. And then hopefully a lot of it will infiltrate. What doesn't infiltrate will be picked up by under drains, which will then convey it.
Hey, John, I'd like to ask you a little bit about the maintenance at Spring Lake Park.
Ongoing maintenance really needs to start during construction. I think every project you learn things, and I think something we could have done better from a design team is have a more robust specification that told the contractor what they had to do or what our expectations were for them to do during construction. And again, as we've talked, these are not 3-month construction processes. These are 2 to 3 to maybe 4-year projects. So it takes a lot of time. There's a lot of time during construction when we really need the contractor to do that. I think the really good, strong thing about this is the relationship that Rocky and myself and my firm have had on this, in that it really shows the requirement of having water resource engineers and landscape architects work really closely together and understand each other's profession and play off the strength of each other's profession.
So next question is kind of open-ended, and it is for both of you. But what things have made you want to pull your hair out?
Gray infrastructure it works the same on its first day, hopefully as 20 years later. And as engineers, I think we get used to that. And when you've got a system like this that's growing and it's alive and it's part of a whole system, it can be a little more challenging. The day that construction ends is not the day that you're done and you can walk away. So some of those things have been a little challenging. I think partly because in public works, we're set up when we do capital projects, that we design them, we bid them, we build them, and there's not a lot after that. But in projects like this, the building can't be the end. It's really just the beginning of establishment. And so, like I said, we had a slope that failed last year, right in the middle of a season when we're dealing with a flood in the Missouri River as well. In a project that you kind of think that you're done with construction, so to come back and fix those things, but that we did get it fixed, and it wasn't actually as bad as we thought it was.
And then Adam Wilmes is PE, and he's in the design division of the Omaha Public Works group. So nice to have both of you here this morning. So I was wondering about the total cost. Adam, is there an estimate right now in terms of what the final cost was and potentially how much we actually saved?
Yeah, for this project, the phase 1 project that included all this green infrastructure in the park, the construction cost was about $10 million, just over $10 million. And but as Emily noted, it saved us from building a large pipe downstream all the way to the river, which we estimated to be about a $5 million savings. So in the $10 million as well, we did have some grants and things too, in the NET for $1 million. So you put those things together, a really cost-effective project.
Well, and then the stormwater runoff that's ultimately getting to the Missouri is cleaner than it potentially would have been. So absolutely. I'm not sure how you define that savings or cost, whatever, but certainly that's a benefit too.
And then there's also, it's an amenity to the city. I was here yesterday on a weekend, and people fishing, people running around the track, people hiking up, riding bicycles up the more remote valleys. So it's just opened it back up to the community, which was, I think, Janet's goal in the first place. So
I'd say, obviously, the lake and the whole system functions extremely well. And this system that's in here now manages the stormwater so much better than just a straight pipe system. And so for the properties downstream, and we saw it last year during the flood, when the Missouri River was up, having this detain some of the runoff where it's at, rather than inundating so much downstream, is a huge benefit. It's very beneficial to have this in place to manage that runoff.